Mr. Kavaservice, good evening, and it's an honor to interview you. You have written several books, and you understand politics, and you have been following Donald Trump and the way he has been bombarding messages for entire globe, if I may say, on Truth Social. My first question to you today will be, however, it's an India-centric question. Today, again, he has told CNBC that he will be imposing tariffs, and it's not new, probably. This is the fourth threat, if I may say. How do you read his statements?
First of all, it's an honor to be with you and to be interviewed by you today. I appreciate it. It's always difficult, even for American observers, to know how seriously to take Donald Trump's proposals at any given moment. We have a sort of framework for interpreting his actions, but the reality is that sometimes what he does is determined by his own emotions and feelings at any given point, and those can change rapidly and without any real underlying reason. We're talking in the wake of Donald Trump having previously imposed a 25% import on tariffs from India, which is expected to take effect, I guess, two days from now when we're talking. But 2 days ago, Trump said that he would substantially raise that tariff even above 25% because of India's continued importation of crude oil from Russia. And this is also at the same time that the European Union has placed additional sanctions upon India because of its importations of Russian crude oil. And the claim is that India is enabling the Russian war machine in Putin's unjustified war against Ukraine. Well, the top line, though, is that Donald Trump is not treating India like a valued ally, let alone like a kind of country of the future. This is only one of several actions he has taken that don't seem to show real respect for India as a valued partner. And furthermore, Trump is putting India in a difficult position because India has actually been following a line of trade and diplomacy that was endorsed by the Biden administration. So Trump is now suddenly moving the goalposts, as we say, and subjecting India to significant additional costs, but also just an entirely different way of doing business. So we're still waiting to see if this is just a bargaining trick or tactic on the part of Trump, or if he means this, and if so, what the ramifications will be.
Okay, now for traditionally speaking, India was always seen as a bulwark for Trump or for America against China. Like a lot of jobs and all, they have been outsourced now to China by big tech companies from Silicon Valley. Now India coming up as an alternative. Now where does that leave America's relations with India?
Again, it's difficult to answer because the Trump administration is something like a royal court. And the outcome of the court depends on which noble has Trump's ear at any given moment and which faction is rising and falling in his affections. There are certainly some people who have a realistic view of international relations, who understand India's importance in the world, its importance as a bulwark against China, as you've said, and its necessary role if the United States is to outcompete China in the realm of scientific and technological advance. However, there are also people in the Trump administration, like, let us say, Stephen Miller, who are very resolutely anti-immigration, who are also, I would say, xenophobic, perhaps even isolationist, who actually see India as a threat and also who see India as taking advantage of the United States. And this is reflected not only as they see it in India's large, in the trade deficit that the United States runs with India, which is something on the order of $46 billion a year, but also in the fact that the United States attracts many very highly talented people from India to our scientific and technological efforts, particularly in Silicon Valley. But then some of these people send money back to India, and some of them actually go back to India, taking the expertise they've learned here. So there are different strains within the administration, some of which would side with India, but many of which would side against.
Okay, now, a couple of days ago, I was watching a clip from Ronald Reagan, and when he initiated about no tariffs and how probably global competition will help even American companies, American industries from getting complacent, and ultimately consumers will benefit. Do you think this is a complete U-turn of Republican as a Republican Party's you can say stance towards trade and tariff, and how they deal with policy of economic openness, if I may say so?
You have asked an interesting question because I am now speaking to you from Washington, D.C., but just yesterday I was in California at the Ronald Reagan Library for a conference put on by the Ronald Reagan Institute, which is trying to evaluate Reagan's legacy in view of the fact that the Republican Party now is under the spell of Donald Trump. And it seems like a very different kind of Republican Party. And many of the things that Ronald Reagan believed are in very sharp contradiction, I would say, to what the Republican Party now holds. And principal among these are the value of free, open global trade, which Ronald Reagan very much supported. Obviously, Donald Trump is cutting back on that, particularly with his tariffs. And then also on the value of alliances. Although, of course, in Ronald Reagan's era, that meant something different when it was still the time of the Cold War. And we had an identifiable enemy in the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. Many things are different right now in Washington and in the Republican Party. However, I believe that most Republicans in their hearts still believe much of what Ronald Reagan taught them when they were growing up. So Donald Trump has put them in a difficult situation because they know that to get ahead in the Republican Party and in American politics right now, they need to adopt this line against trade. But in their heart of hearts, they may actually believe that free trade, the Ronald Reagan way, is the right thing to do.
Now I have another set of questions for you. World's strongest democracy, most powerful democracy, and world's biggest democracy, India, and world's strongest, America, with a growing economy. Don't you think this should have been left to experts to negotiate, talk, and come to a conclusion rather than putting out threats on Truth Social and not adhering, not respecting to international norms? Like he has tossed ethics, like he's tossed away all the ethics that probably America stands for.
The United States is not treating India with the respect it deserves for all the reasons you've outlined. But this has to do with Donald Trump's erratic manner of diplomacy, if I may put it that way. In that sense, he doesn't treat India differently than he treats any other country, because this is just how he does these things. Now, the United States, again, has subjected India to some some treatment that it would not really demand of other of its allies. I'm actually thinking here particularly of the One Big Beautiful Bill, the budget that passed through Congress recently, which originally called for a 5% tax on remittances from Indians working in the United States as well as Mexicans working in the United States. But those were the only two countries in the world that were singled out for this, which would have had a significant damaging effect, I think, on India's economy. And in the end, that was negotiated down from 5% to 1%. So it's still, I think, an extraordinary and uncalled for tax upon two of our major allies and trading partners, but it could have been much worse. But I think, again, this is the way things are done in Trump's Washington. There simply isn't the kind of consultation that you would expect from allies, even though, again, given that we are in something like a Cold War with China, you would expect that there should be very close consultation with our Indian allies.
You used a very important word, probably Cold War with China. Now, for all these years, what we studied, what we understood was there was a Cold War between Russia, USSR, and like then USSR and Russia and America. So it's a new era definitely that we are in now. My question now about we all talk of being a natural ally, and this time Donald Trump has probably gone too far and threatened India's Prime Minister Modi has a couple of days ago he urged Indians to probably buy Indian products. Now, considering the size of India's economy and the purchasing power, and it's growing every single day, you think this will backfire on Trump?
Donald Trump is encouraging the forces of nationalism and populism around the world, but to some extent, he's also fueling a backlash against some of those forces of nationalism and populism too. It's hard to know how those will balance out. I think there's a high-level argument to be made among some of the most serious diplomats in the Trump administration, which is that the United States is not quite in a Cold War with China in the same way that it was with the Soviet Union, but that there is a sort of division appearing where some of the more authoritarian powers in the world are seeking to undo the global order that the United States has led and in many ways kept in place since the end of World War II. And this is an order that has also benefited India in many ways in its rise to economic power and in raising so many of its citizens out of poverty to middle class status. And the argument could be that if the authoritarian powers are seeking to end this order by unilaterally changing global borders, by invading other countries, then India has as much of a stake in this order as the United States does, and that therefore it should not actually be supporting Russia or its war machine through buying Russia's crude oil imports, because I think India does take something on the order of 1/3 of Russia's oil imports, with China taking about half. That's a fairly high level discussion, and I don't think that's the kind of discussion that the Trump administration is honestly having with India, either in public or behind closed doors, but perhaps it is the kind of argument that it needs to be making a little more forthrightly.
Now, one more question I have is it's pretty perplexing right now. When Trump was in the race for presidency and Biden was on his way out, there was a period when he was like yet to be sworn in, and it was believed that Donald Trump was not in favor of Ukraine, and that's why his first meeting with Zelensky ended in a public blow-up in Washington. It was like at the Oval Office. So there was a perception in India that India buying crude oil from Russia had Trump's approval as well at that point of time. Now, and I have read a couple of statements, like if you go back probably 6 months ago, you'll see his readings that was a smart choice. These were the words he said, like Modi is a great administrator, he is a great man, he knows how to negotiate. Now, do you think he's using this as threat tactics to probably get India sign or ink a deal that probably what he wants? Is it just a mere threat tactics?
Again, we're getting into the intricacies of Donald Trump's psyche, which are very hard for us to figure out here in the United States. And again, it had been thought that Modi was one of Trump's most favored leaders in the world, someone with whom he got along well. He had a wonderful state visit to India from his standpoint. He was treated very well. He's spoken very kindly of India in the past. However, it's also true that one of Donald Trump's main promises when he came into this second administration was that he would end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one, he said. And it's also the case that Trump very much would like to have the Nobel Peace Prize, partly because this would allow him to draw even in his own mind and on the world stage with President Obama, who had previously received the Nobel Peace Prize. So now he's actually reacting with great indignation against Vladimir Putin for not ending the war and frankly for making Trump look ridiculous. And this is also perhaps causing him to reevaluate some of his other relationships with world leaders such as Modi. And it could be that Donald Trump is now changing the status quo ante from the Biden administration because Trump thinks that he needs to put additional pressure on Putin, and he thinks that pressuring India is the way to get to that outcome. But again, Donald Trump does not really think to the future. He doesn't think about a world in which India has actually turned against the United States and is starting to think more about its own interests and how it can act as a more unilateral actor in the world. But that is the direction in which I think Trump is pushing India and the rest of the world to consider the United States to be an unreliable ally, one that can no longer be regarded as the guarantor of the post-World War II global order. And that means that we're looking at a world in which each country needs to decide for itself what it can do in the absence of that strong American global leadership that we've come to depend on for 80 years.
Well, Jeffrey Gabaservice, while Donald Trump remains an enigma for India and the entire globe, I must thank you for your time, and we will discuss all the things in detail probably in another podcast with probably when we are better prepared. So, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. It was an honor to talk to you.
Thank you.